doubt yourself and take the dreams off the shelf. And go on, share your gift. Yeah, your gift is a seed. You can easily be the change that we need. Keep your mind alert and your heart with peace. Be the change that we want to see. Yeah, go and share your gift. Yeah, your gift is a seed. You can easily be the change that we need. Keep your mind alert and fill your heart with peace. Be the change that we want to see. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mentality Unchained. I'm Kevin Thomas, your host, the therapist. I'm always looking for different ways to understand the whole dynamics of mental health. And one of the ways I kind of reached out to my colleagues just to kind of find some new and fresh ideas. And one of my colleagues gave me the name of John Hood. And here's the thing. When you hear a name called John Hood, you know that brother has to have some knowledge of something, right? Well, here's the thing. This brother is an astrophysicist, and I don't know what that is. I don't know anything about it, but he's about to tell us about that today. And he's also going to talk to us a little bit about mental health as well. So without further ado, welcome John Hood to the show, guys. What's up, John?
What's up, Kevin? Thanks for having me, man.
Man, I appreciate you coming. We were talking off air, man. We was talking about this dissertation stuff, man. And I know you all the way deep in it, and I'm about to get ready to get started. You kind of freaked me out, but I ain't come on the show to talk about that today, though. I want to talk about you, man. I want to talk about what you're doing, how you got into what you are doing, and also how mental health either plays a part in your life or is involved in some of the things that you've been dealing with. So, man, I appreciate you coming through. Let's chop it up for a second and talk about why did you get into astrophysics?
Oh, man. So it's actually a kind of funny story of how I got actually into the field of astrophysics. So, because of the name, you can tell there's a lot of physics and math involved with it. But growing up, I actually was told and believed that I just wasn't good at math. So all the way through grade school, high school, I was that kid that was like, you know what, I'm not good at math. I had teachers that were told me I was good with my hands. So I decided to originally take a career in engineering. And I grew up in Columbus, Georgia. And the path that I chose originally was I was going to get a 2-year machining degree at Columbus Tech, and I was going to go work at Pratt & Whitney and work on building airplane parts. But things happened and the program that I was in got shut down, and I ended up taking up another degree at Columbus State and enter into a similar program, a 2-year engineering program. And while there, I decided to take an astronomy course, because it's it's astronomy. I always had an interest in the field. So I was like, yeah, that'd be pretty cool. I can learn more about space. See what I can pick up. The professor that was in the class, Dr. Sean Cruzen, noticed that I had what he said was a knack, more than just an interest in the field, and approached me one day after class and was like, hey, what's your major? And I was like, oh, I'm in the pre-engineering program. I'm transferring out in a year and a half. It's like, oh, have you ever thought about astrophysics? And I audibly laughed. It wasn't a rude laugh, but it was kind of that nervous, for real.
Right,
really,
me,
really,
right?
Astrophysics, come on, man. I was like, I have never taken a physics course in my life. I was like, and I'm not that good at math. I'm barely good enough to get through the stuff that we're doing in this class. Then he kind of gave me this look I don't know about that. So he was like, how about this? I'll help you change your major. You try out a couple of the courses for a semester or two. And if you don't like it, I'll personally put in the paperwork to change your major back. Wow. That was in 2010. Wow. And here we are now, 2022, and I'm a couple months away from defending my dissertation to get my PhD in the same field that I laughed about starting 10 years ago.
Man, hey, look, my mind is blown just hearing that story, right? Because that just don't happen. I mean,
Yeah.
you from Columbus, Georgia,
Yep.
and you're African American, and your teacher told you were good with your hands, and you say, okay, I'm good with my hands. I'll just go to engineering school. I mean, that doesn't translate to me. I don't know one black astrophysicist. I don't even
I'm
know a one white astrophysicist.
like there are definitely a few of us out there, but it's not a lot. It's not a lot like
Wow.
comparative to the rest of the field for sure.
Yeah. I know you did say something that really just kind of like resonated with me. Is like your teacher told you that you were good with your hands. She didn't think, or he didn't think that your mind was strong enough or broad enough to do something of this magnitude.
Yeah, I remember like going to like like the high school guidance counselors. They like tell you, well, I'm not sure how it is in like other states, but typically they say you're either college prep or tech prep.
Yeah.
And because I had always believed I wasn't good at math or
Mhm.
like science or any of those things, like I found those topics interesting, but well, science, I always found the science interesting. With the math, I was always afraid of.
Mhm.
But just like hearing that, you're just like, okay, I'm just not even really going. You kind of give up hope on trying at it.
Yeah.
So like my grades in those like courses were lacking because I had no faith in myself to even really try, because like the adults are telling you like you're not good at this, and then you fail a class or two and it's like, oh, I'm really not good at this.
Yeah.
So there's no point in me even continuing trying to do anything that involves this topic.
Right.
So yeah, I remember she was my guidance counselor was saying like, oh, you should look at doing a tech prep program. Like
Mhm.
you're excelling in like these like the shop classes, so you're good with your hands, so you should do something with shop. And I'm
Gotcha.
like, oh, okay, yeah, shop's fun. Like I like it. I enjoy doing the work. Like
Yeah.
cool. Sounds like a good path to me. Didn't think anything about it.
Wow. So what's your so John, tell the people what's your background? Like how were you brought up? Where were you raised, and how was that dynamics?
Oh man, that could be a long podcast.
Hey man, look, do what you do. Here's the thing, because I think people need to understand, like, astrophysicists just don't fall out of the sky. You almost got to have from day one. It's like baseball. You can't just go into high school saying I want to play baseball. You're already behind. And
Yep.
so you have to do that from a kid, from little league all the way up. And now we're talking about you're dropping from shop class to now astrophysicist, and you saying that your grades were, they were okay, but like what type of environment did you grow up in, man?
So I'm the youngest of 10, starting off with there. So I'm like the baby in my family, like of 10, I have 10 or 9 older siblings. Um, yeah, my parents both finished around high school. My dad was career military.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I'm the first generation to like seek higher education. And yeah, the household that I grew up in, it was more, I want to say that we were a more religious family. Like my dad was he was like a deacon in the church and everything, so he kind of groomed us or like raised us to like be like strong, like more religious than anything else.
Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't until maybe middle school that I started like venturing off into like other possible avenues. First thought of going to college was to go for music, and I actually won a scholarship, like an art scholarship, to go to oh man, Full Sail University in Florida.
Really?
And that was like my first thought was like, oh, I'm going to go here. I'm going to be a music major.
Mhm.
I'm going to learn how to play all of the instruments that I can. I was in the marching band in high school, so I tried to pick up at least a little bit of everything that was there to try to know something.
Mhm.
But I remember having like a conversation with like my dad at one point where he was like, oh, you want to do music? You're not going to be able to do much with that. You need to try to think of something else. So
Mhm.
I'm like, oh, okay, so music's out. What can I do then? And found out like he was also career military. So his kind of ideal for me was to join the military and
Yeah, of course.
kind of like follow the same path that he did. But it became very obvious by the time I graduated that wasn't really what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So it was always kind of a battle there. Like the support wasn't like fully there as like what some other people would have received for taking the path that I did.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So at any point were you discouraged throughout that, that journey of trying to find your way, trying to figure out a career, and now to where you are now?
Yes. there were so many times that I was discouraged. When I first started undergrad, I didn't go straight from high school to undergrad. Also, I graduated high school in 2006. I was still in the tech program that I was in until 2007.
Mm-hmm.
But when that program ended, I didn't just like finish there and then go straight to Columbus State.
Mm-hmm.
I was out of school for about a year or 2 years total. I didn't start undergrad until 2009.
Wow.
So during that time, like I worked like a bunch of odd jobs. I was a server at a restaurant. I was like a cook for a little while, just like different things, just kind of like trying to figure life out.
Yeah.
And my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife,
Okay.
she was the one that found out about the pre-engineering program at Columbus State where she was attending. And she was like, oh, if you still want to do that, you should try this out. So since I didn't come straight from high school, like when I took my test to get into undergrad, like, of course, me not being good at math, I completely bombed the math portion of the entrance exam.
Okay.
Like, oh, we have to put you in these like remedial math classes. And I was like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And they were like, so this is going to limit the types of classes that you can take. And immediately it's just like, oh man, really? Like, I can't even fully get in. Like, is this something that I should really do?
Right.
So from the jump, it was like some just like slight discouragement from me, like casting doubt on my own abilities and like not realizing what I'm capable of at the time. But again, I had a professor in that class, in one of those classes, that I guess because I was like very blunt and upfront with him, he saw something in me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll still remember his name was Professor Castleton, Randall Castleton. I had 3 tries to get out of 3 different classes, and I had to pass, to get out of 2 different classes, and I had to pass all of them, both of those classes within those 3 tries to get out. My first attempt, I failed. So now I'm like, I have to like 100% both of these next 2. Like I have to pass both of these like on the first try on the next try in order to actually proceed into actually attending college. So the first day of class, I remember walking up to his desk and I was like, Professor Castleton, so I'm just letting you know now, I'm not good at math. So I'm going to be in your office every day because I have 2 more attempts to get out of these remedial classes and I have 2 more classes to take. And he was like, you're not good at math? And I was like, not at all. He was like, all right, well, we'll see about that. And like he worked with me like on an almost daily basis, like just teaching me, like making it clear. Like he just made everything make sense the way he taught. And then I remember after I passed his class, and then the next class I had a different professor.
Oh.
He kept tabs on me throughout that class, and he would see me as like, how's it going? What are you discussing? Like he would still work with me on stuff. And then after I got out, I remember he just kind of like approached me one day. He was like, oh, what courses are you taking this semester? And I was like, oh, I'm actually taking like pre-calculus and this. And he was like, oh, so you're out of the remedial classes. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, I'm taking like pre-calc and I'm like starting this like intro astronomy, like this like second tier astronomy course. And he's like, huh, crazy. Didn't know somebody who wasn't good at math could do all of that. And he just like slowly walks away. And I was like, I will never forget like that last interaction that I had with him. Cause it's like, I like this guy.
How did you go from remedial classes and into calculus? Did you just
So
did you think you can do that?
I really didn't, but it was one of those things that like, so I was, by the time I was in like that second remedial math class, like since I had passed the first one,
Mhm.
it allowed me to take that astronomy course. And that's why I ended up taking like the pre-calculus and calculus class.
Gotcha.
And again, never thought that I would ever have to take those courses in high school. Like I didn't avoid them, but I was just like, I'm not going to need that, so I'm not even going to attempt it. So
Wow.
it was like this whole combination of like people like helping me along the way. And like that's one thing I'll always say, like, it takes a village. It really does take a village. And sometimes you have to sometimes you stumble into your village and you have to seek out your village.
Mhm.
Sometimes people are just like born into their village. But
Yeah.
with me, I felt like for my journey going from not being good at math and only being good with my hands to becoming an astrophysicist, it was a combination of like seeking out my village and stumbling into it at the same time. Because
Wow.
these professors that kind of rallied around me were like amazing. Like I actually just talked to Dr. Cruz and like yesterday. Like I talked to him frequently. When I defended my master's thesis, he called me like 30 minutes before and was like giving me a pep talk on the phone, like asking me, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Like, you got this. Like, this is your science. Like, just go in there and explain your science to them. Like, that's what you're here for.
Wow. Not that it matters, but was Dr. Cruz black or white?
He was white.
See this, and that's why I said it. Not that it matters, because see, when people see something in you, they will get behind you.
Yeah.
And I can appreciate that. I mean, it seems like you've always had someone there to push you. That says a lot about you, though, because a lot of professors won't do that. But if they see the resilience, the fact that you want it, they're going to support you, man. And you got it, man. A lot of people don't get that, but hey, hats off to you. So you have an undergrad in astrophysics and what is it? It's planetary and geology.
Yeah.
What is that?
So my undergrad major was astrophysics and planetary geology, and basically what that means is my focus in undergrad was more on the astrophysics side, but the courses that I took also helped me gain like an understanding of like what are like planetary bodies made out of, like the type of geology that you can find on Mars, or the geology of Earth. Like more specifically, I learned a lot from courses with like professors there, like Dr. Barano and Dr. Brown and Dr. Fraser, about how to identify the difference between sediments. Like if you see a rock that has a certain composition to it, like identifying like, oh, this rock used to be like this rock came from like an ancient seafloor, or this rock was made inside of a volcano. Like just different things like that. And I always find like really interesting. Like I just recently went to Arizona, and just having that stuff in the back of my mind gave me a whole different outlook on like what the landscape looked like out there. And it's like, oh man, like this is insane. Like this was carved, like the whole area was like carved out by something like really powerful.
Look, I'm not an astrophysicist, but I went to Arizona, my wife and I, last year, man, and I loved it.
Yeah.
I love the structure. I love the mountains. I love the air. I just love it all in Arizona. To me, it was just awesome. I was able to really connect spiritually as well, because of the way it's just kind of it speaks to you, and so
Yeah.
I love Arizona. But like for you to learn something that didn't take your hands, it's just all like mind strength. It's just like, hey, you got to look at this and say, this is what it is. It's not like you were making something from scratch with your hands, but like it takes a lot of that brain power. Like how do you deal with like mental health, or do you deal with mental health, or is that a part of your experience?
Yeah. So because of the way that because I'll say, because of the way that I was like brought up, mental health was something that I never really like thought about until like the last few years. Because I very much grew up in a pray about it household.
Yep, me too.
And as you can probably like relate to that. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
like, so it was always, I had this mentality growing up where I had this mantra where anytime something would go wrong, I would just say, oh, I'll be all right. Like, I'm John, I'll be all right.
Yeah.
Like, no matter how big, how bad it was, it's like, I'll be all right. I'll be all right. And later in life, like realizing like that is not good. Like, you should actually face like the things that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
It was kind of like, it was like a weird form of culture shock, right? Because it's like, oh, I should actually acknowledge this stuff and like talk about it with somebody. How do I do that? So it was like literally starting from like ground zero, and like I'm still like working my way through that now.
Yeah.
I have like met like a number of great mentors. Like I had a mental health advisor like for the first time last year, and I loved it. Like, because we would talk and like he would help me like think through things. It's like, oh, so this is happening. Like, like how do you like how are you feeling? Like, how does that make you feel? Like, how did that whole situation like make you feel? And usually it's either I'm okay or I'm pissed.
Yeah, right. No in between, right?
Yeah, there was no in between, and it was like 98% of the time it's like, all right, I'm okay, that's small, I'll just brush it under the rug. But then like when the I'm pissed comes out, like it just like explodes because all of this stuff is like built up, and you're like, I had to like realize like, oh, I'm exploding over like not just this one thing, but all of this other stuff that built up too.
Yeah, I don't think, and I'm so glad you said that, because I don't think the Black culture understand that enough, is that we can only push it down for so long. And when it comes out, it's unpredictable. You just don't know. And the pray about it thing, I grew up in that. I was raised by my grandparents, so that was the common thing, is we pray about everything. And you know, I had to work through some serious anger issues because of just pray about it. And, so I get what I identify with what you are saying. And see, for me, like as a Black therapist, it's like, where did you come up with that? How did you figure you wanted to be a therapist? Like, we don't do that kind of stuff. And I'm like, this is just where I'm gifted. I mean, this is where I'm supposed to be. They don't understand that. And I'm glad you even brought that out. It's like to talk about that stuff. Did you volunteer for a mental health mentor, or they forced it on you?
It wasn't a forced thing for sure.
Okay.
The volunteer part is a little bit, it's just kind of strange to answer, because it was more like there's a lot of stuff going on. And my advisor at Vanderbilt, like my primary advisor, was like, they found like basically like a therapist for people in our program, for like the minority students in our program to like talk to. And she was like, if you would like, I can try to see if I can connect the two of you. And I was like, let me think about it. I'm good, but you know, like I'm all right. So I was like, I'll think about it for a little bit. And then the more stuff started happening, the more my wife was kind of like, have you ever reached out to like your boss about that? The therapist? And I was like, no, I'm good. It was just like, I think you should just talk to him once and see.
She was real nice about it.
Like, just see what it's about. And I'm like, all right, I'll try it out. And then I did, and yeah, like we became like really close. Like I haven't talked to him in a little while, just because like that's just like my failure. Like I've just been like super busy trying to get like a bunch of other stuff in order. But yeah, because he's based in Nashville, so we would meet like virtually. So he was like, yeah, we can. He was like, I'm still here for you. Like if you need me, for
Yeah.
anything. And I was just like, yeah, he's trying to like connect me with like an actual therapist here, which is, I partially want to blame like those same kind of thoughts in the back of my head. I was like, I'm all right. But it's like a combination of, I'm all right, but I'm really not. But I got all of this crap right here in front of me that I need to deal with at the time. So I'm like, okay, once this dies down, I'll actually focus on like trying to find like a
And you
new
know what,
therapist.
John, and that's what we do. Exactly that. It's like we got all these other things and we put ourselves last
Yep.
because we like that's more important than us. But in actuality, if we don't check ourselves, everything else ain't even gonna happen at all.
Yeah.
So, and how do you do that having a friend that is a therapist and you like, oh, I'm good? Because that's our famous words, right? I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm all right.
Yeah. And you know you got a therapist friend and Ashley, and you're like, I'm good, I'm good. And I know she constantly checking in. I mean,
Yeah.
is for I'm just saying here on the podcast is that I know you feel that you're good, and I know you need to just sit down and just kind of relax a little bit. So I'll let you deal with that on your own. But at the same at the same time, like you're in a place now that a lot of people don't get, and there's a stat out there about when individuals go to get their PhD, a lot of them drop out. You know,
Yeah.
I'm hearing that as I get ready to start mine. It's like a lot of them drop out because it's so intense. It's so time consuming. It requires all your attention, and you're almost ready to defend. Like hearing those stories, those horror stories, how do you continue to push through that?
I honestly want to say, like, again, like one of the things that helps me push through is I often hear something that Dr. Cruzen told me right before I graduated undergrad. I had talked to him about going to graduate school, and he was so excited. He was so happy for me that I had decided to possibly pursue a PhD.
Mm-hmm.
He knows like everything about like my family dynamic, like my background growing up and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And he was already kind of like telling me, it's like, well, he was like, I'm proud of you just for considering that.
Yeah.
The simple fact that you're getting your astrophysics bachelor's right now already means that you're going to change the norm for the next generation of your family.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, it took a while for me to really kind of like fully understand what he meant. But he was like, if you actually decide to go for your PhD and you get your PhD, imagine how that's going to change the dynamic between like you and your future kids.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I'm just going to have a different job, different money. Like, that's in my head at the time. That's how I was thinking about it. But then like the further along into this process that I got and started seeing like, oh, I was the only African-American student in the astrophysics program in undergrad. So when I started my master's and I went to Fisk, which is an HBCU in Nashville, there were like Black people everywhere. And I was like, oh crap, there are other Black people who are interested in this type of stuff. I no longer felt like the weird guy.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Or anything. So it's like, okay, so this is crazy. But then it's still like you go to a conference and then you realize that there's me and like 3 or 4 other like Black students there, and then everybody else is not Black.
Right.
Like a combination of like other races, like mostly white though.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, there it is. There's that oddly familiar feeling of feeling like you're the odd person in the room because there's that one thing that's different.
Yeah. Yeah.
I never really been the type of person to seriously focus on that, but I would still notice it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the more that happened, the more I started realizing what like Dr. Cruzen was really saying to me. And I was like, oh, I'll have a PhD. My kids will know me as like someone who's like an intellectual who has a PhD, and people will address me with that like authority or like position of like doctor. And I was like, that's what he meant.
Yeah.
Because I had never experienced that. Like I had never met a Black person with a PhD before then.
Wow.
My first time meeting a Black person with a PhD was right before I started graduate school. And I was working as the observatory technician at the observatory at my undergrad. And I was asked, like, we were like, oh, we're getting a new dean for the School of Sciences. Like, we need, like, basically put all of your best people in their positions. So I'm in the observatory, like, I'm getting everything set up. We did solar observing at the time. So I had the telescope pointing at the sun. Like, I had a picture of it, like a live feed of it up on the computer screen. Like, it was just kind of like doing all the show-offy stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I was like going to be the person, like, tell them about the telescope. Like, I'm the representative of the observatory at the time. And I hear Dr. Cruzen and a couple other people coming up the stairs to the observatory. So I'm like standing, I'm like, okay, all right, get ready. Gotta impress them. It's the new dean. Gotta make a good impression. And they come up to the landing where the telescope was, and there were two older white guys, older white woman, and maybe a Black guy who seemed like he was maybe like in his like mid to late 40s or something. You know, it's hard to tell how old Black people are sometimes.
Yeah.
So I'm like waiting for the deans to like introduce themselves, because at this point, like, there's a group of them talking. Like, the woman comes over, she's like, oh, hi, I'm such and such. And I'm like, oh, okay, she didn't introduce herself as the dean, so it's not her. So I'm like, okay, so there's two older white guys and then the Black guy. I'm assuming that the Black guy is like from the school, just like showing them around. So like one of the older white guys is like, oh, let me go introduce myself. I'm like, oh, hi, I'm John. It's like, oh, okay, it's not him either. So I'm like, okay, it's gotta be this guy.
Yeah.
And the guy comes over, he's like, oh, I'm such and such. And I'm like, none of them said that they were the dean. And then like finally, like the Black guy turns around, he was like, oh, hold on, like I'm being rude. Let me introduce myself. He's like, hi, I'm such and such. I'm the new dean. And he saw like the shock on my face.
Yeah.
And promptly announced it to the room. It's like, oh, caught you off guard, didn't I? I was like, why'd you have to say that? So
you
why'd you have to say that? So like, he was like, I can already tell we're gonna get along. He was like, here's my card. Come see me like tomorrow in the dean's office so we can like have a chat.
Yeah. And
then I did, and he was like super friendly guy. Like, and he could tell, he was like, you've never met another Black scientist before, have you? And I was like, no. I was the only one that I had met at that time was at a conference in 2014 where I met Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Really?
And that was like celebrity scientist. So it's like, it counts, but it's like
not don't count. Right.
Yeah. It's not the same as like meeting someone who's like at the university level doing stuff. So I was just like, no, I haven't. And he was like, well, we're out here. I just want you to know that. Like, just, he was like, how far along are you? I was like, I actually just graduated. I'm applying to graduate schools now. And he was like, he like gave me his contact information. Like, we connected on like LinkedIn and everything. He's like, if you ever got questions about anything, like need assistance with stuff, like feel free to reach out to me. And
wow.
I was like, yeah, I really appreciate that.
You just dispel the the notion that we don't have stereotypes against our own people.
Yeah,
because it is, to be honest with you, we do that because we haven't experienced that. We haven't seen that, and it's 2022, and you're saying, you know, up until 4 or 5 years ago, that was your first time ever meeting a Black guy that had a PhD. Now that says a lot. That does say a lot. But I tell you what, though, if we can experience that a lot more, I think that it would be more common to us. And the fact that you're doing that same thing is awesome. I like the piece, though, you know, the legacy that you're going to have for your kids, though. Like, you're going to do this, and that's not a legacy you've seen prior to you. So now you get to create something different for your family.
Yeah. And like that same reason is like why I've tried my best to be as active as I can in like different communities, just so people can like young people can see like Black, white,
Yeah.
Asian. I don't really care as long as like a young person sees me in a state as a
Mhm.
scientist.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because then it's like, oh, that guy's a scientist. Like I met a Black scientist. They might not think of it like that, but like in the back of their head, like as they get
Yeah.
older, when they start imagining a scientist, I would like to imagine that those who have met me will remember meeting me as a scientist as well as like other people. So they automatically don't have that same like stereotype that I did when I met that dean. It's like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
it could be him. I've met a Black scientist before, so it could be any of them. I just
Right.
have to wait and see which one it is.
Right, right. I think too, like the fact that we are in the field that we are in, you're in your field and I'm in my field, it's different. And I think I look for the same thing. It's just to be noticed and recognized as a therapist, not as a Black therapist. And you want to be a scientist, not just a Black scientist. But the fact that we haven't had much experience with those groups of people being in those capacities, it's hard to not say Black scientists or Black therapists. And so until we get more people involved and we see us more, we can get rid of those that Black this, Black that. And that's what I'm shooting for. I'm hoping that at some point we can drop the adjective Black off the fact that I'm just a therapist, And so you keep doing what you're doing. So you did start talking about the kids though. Like what are you doing in the community right now? I know you're part of the what's that, first discoveries and stuff. So tell me a little bit about what's going on.
Yeah, so the first discoveries program was, so I don't think I said this earlier, but yeah, I'm a Vanderbilt PhD candidate, like defending in June.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been in Chicago for the past almost going 3.5 years now, doing research with the South Pole Telescope group here.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a graduate student who started a program called First Discoveries, where the whole goal is to take science and make it accessible for preschool age kids.
Gotcha.
So in doing that, what we do is we work with teachers to come up with lesson plans that have like different like activities and things like that that are more accessible for like a younger mind to try to grasp and start asking questions like, how do you like learning how to form a hypothesis, how to test that hypothesis and things like that. But like in a fun way for that a preschool kid would enjoy.
Yeah.
And the school that we've been working with in the past 2 years has been Fisk Elementary, and we've had an amazing time working with them. And Fisk Elementary is like a majority Black school, if I'm remembering correctly. And just being in the classroom with them has been an experience.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's like, okay, even just showing my face for a few minutes, like for a couple minutes a week, I'm counting that as a win, because again, like they're seeing a scientist that looks like them, that's coming in and like teaching them something new.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna tell you right now, I would love to see a scientist with a Wu-Tang shirt on. Because I'm telling you, man, we can rap, we can talk a little bit, but yeah, no, but I like that though. Like I think we don't have enough sciences for the kids, and especially for urban kids. It's really hard for urban kids to get into science. And so if you can make it fun, if they can see someone that looks like them, I think that all kind of lends it to the kids being more active and wanting to be in science. I think that's beautiful, actually, for that to happen that way, but we don't do enough of it. And so, hey, hats off for you for doing that in your community, because at the end of the day, it starts in the community, we give it back, and we have to work with it like that. So, okay. So then now I don't even think I did this, but I want to go back and do this because I want to make sure. Tell everyone, what is an astrophysicist? And then what will your primary job be as a PhD grad, doctor, astrophysicist? What is that? Okay. Tell me about that.
So pure and simple, what an astrophysicist is is someone who takes the applications of the math that we have in physics, and we apply that to trying to study space, things in space. So a really good example of that is everybody knows that the planets orbit the sun. There were applications of physics applied to astronomical observations that allowed that fact to come to light.
Okay.
So there was basically like there were a group of people there, or people in the past that were like, we see these things moving across the sky. We don't know what they are, so they call them planets, which was basically like, I think it was Latin for like traveling star. So they're like, why are they doing that? So they use physics and math to figure out what they were and why they did that. And then they also use physics to build telescopes to observe them better. So how lenses work in a telescope, just like with your eyes, that's an application of like science, physics, and mathematics.
Wow.
So what I do now, what my focus is I've actually taken both sides of that as my focus for my PhD. Since I was told growing up that I was good with my hands, I actually practiced at that a lot and actually did become good with my hands.
Okay.
So a part of my thesis or my dissertation work is actually experimental cosmology.
Okay.
Cosmology is basically the study of the universe. We want to know everything about everything that's out there. We want to know how the universe started, how it went from like this vast nothingness before the Big Bang to where we are now. So on the experimental side, I've actually worked to help develop new detector technologies for telescope cameras to observe further and deeper into space so that we can learn more about what's there.
Man, that's a long way from Georgia, man.
Yeah.
That's a long. I'm curious of how you sell the Big Bang to your religious family. How do you do that?
Long story short, I don't. So just like being fully candid, when I was in undergrad, when I first changed my major from engineering to astrophysics, my dad refused to even acknowledge that I was in school. Like, he wouldn't ask how my day went. If I had an exam, he wouldn't ask how the exam went. No questions whatsoever. It wasn't until I moved, from Georgia to Nashville to start graduate school that he ever even acknowledged that I was in school for astrophysics. And I feel like at that point, it was only because he's like, I guess this is just what you're going to do. So
yeah.
So I guess I'll just have to accept it. So for like 4 or 5 years, no support from like him in that regard whatsoever.
Wow. How did you deal with that, man?
I'm still dealing with it now sometimes, because it's definitely one of those things where, again, it's like, whatever. Like, I didn't need it. Like, it would have been nice to have like that support like at home.
Yeah.
But that's where, again, I say like I stumbled into like my village of like the people who were like more than happy to support me, that were also very religious at the same time. So for a while, I was extremely jaded, and I was like, oh, so you can't be religious and be a scientist at the same time? Like, or you can't be religious and like acknowledge like me as a scientist at the same time?
Yeah.
But then again, Dr. Cruzen stepped in,
Mhm.
who is a devout Christian, like very active in his church,
Gotcha.
and was also a PhD in astrophysics.
And that was my next question, is because I know that you would get that question, or you would have to they would challenge you on that.
Oh my God, yes.
You get it all the time.
All the time. Like I even get it from Lyft drivers, man. Like the number of times that I've had like a Lyft driver that's like, oh, what do you do? Because they're dropping me off like on campus, like, oh, what do you do? Especially in Nashville, not so much in Chicago, but
Okay.
in Nashville, it was definitely a thing. So, oh, what do you do for a living? It's like, oh, I'm a graduate student studying astrophysics. It's like, oh, so you're an atheist, huh? It's like, what?
Yeah, right.
Like, how is that an automatic? Like, why is that an automatic connection that you make? It's like, no, I'm not an atheist. like, where did you get that? It's like, oh, you're like a scientist, right? Like, those two things don't equate.
But see, that's the hardest part, though. That's like, it's hard to sell that science, if you believe in science, that you don't have, you have a religion. And I, for the life of me, I don't understand how we get to a point where we tie those together. And so
I feel like, yeah, I'm not sure either, but I feel like there's just this clash of beliefs that shouldn't be there.
Right.
Because there are some people who take their beliefs as being like 100% fact certain, and there's no questioning it.
Yeah.
So anything that you say that contradicts that, they just can't accept it.
Yeah. And that's I'm sorry to cut you off, because I think that's the thing, is that anyone that has a PhD, I'm getting my EDD, they look for evidence. You know, it's strictly evidence-based, you know, it's on the science, but then the balance of what you truly believe in as a person, it kind of gets misconstrued some kind of way through, I guess, because of the idea that other people have, not so much of what you have, but what other people have, their notes, their ideas of what it is. If you're a Christian, that you can't believe this, you can't do that. If you're a Buddhist, you can't do this, you can't. I mean, I think it's just a huge misunderstanding. I'm gonna use that word.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And yeah, it's like I said, at one point in my life, I was like very jaded because of things that like I had personally dealt with in that regard. But ever since then, I've met so many people from all sorts of religious backgrounds that are scientists.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is kind of like connecting back to what you were saying about like meeting a scientist like with a Wu-Tang t-shirt on.
Right.
People have this idea in their head of what a scientist is, what a scientist does, and what a scientist looks like.
Yeah.
And by looks like, I don't mean necessarily like a certain skin tone. I just mean like their demeanor, like how they present themselves.
Yep.
And there was something else that I like learned from a postdoc when I was like still at Vanderbilt, like when I was still like living in Nashville, that we need to stop that. Like all scientists don't wear lab coats. All scientists don't walk around with like not flannel t-shirts, but like flannel shirts, but like, it's not like we have a dress code when we go to the office. Like we dress like anybody else. We do the same things. Like I play video games too. Like I watch anime. Like I watch like TV. Like it's not like all we do is science. Like we're people just like everybody else. But it's one of those things where people like they put scientists in this bubble, and if you don't fit within that bubble, then they question whether you're actually even a scientist or not.
Yeah.
Like that happened to me here in Chicago when we first moved. There was a Lyft driver. We ended up doing like a shared Uber or something. And we're just like talking. They're like, oh, like what brought you to Chicago? Because my wife and I had just moved. And I was like, oh, I never really want to say it because I don't know how people are going to respond. And my wife throws me under the bus all the time. It's like, oh, we're here because he's in graduate school. He's getting his PhD in astrophysics. And I'm like, why you gotta say that? Like,
Yeah, right.
for school. I remember like the person who we were sharing the ride with, like, turned and looked at me and was like, no, you're not. You're not an astrophysicist. I'm like, I don't have like a card that says like astrophysicist with like a president's signature on it. And it's like, so how am I supposed to prove to you like that this is my career? And like you can tell that he was like, he didn't just like look at me. He was just like looking at like how I was dressed and everything. He was like, nah, like I don't believe it.
I've experienced that too. So I know exactly what you mean. I'm going to say this, and then I'm going to segue into that next question I'm going to ask you when it comes to that. Is my first experience as a private practice therapist was in a predominantly white city, town, however you want to say. And when I came out of the office, my very first client, I come out of the office and I had to use the bathroom. And so I was on my way to the bathroom, and my client walks past me and she says, can you please tell me where Kevin Thomas' office is? And right. And so I said, well, if you go up and sit in the lobby, I'll be back to show you where his office is. So I went on to the restroom and I come back and I said, let me show you where the office is. And so I took her back into the office and I opened her door and let her walk in. And then I walked behind her and closed it. And she was so embarrassed. She continued to, she profusely apologized to me. It's like, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it. But society put these perspectives and blinders on us to say, okay, if you're this, you can't be that.
Yep.
And so I make it a point to tell every client that I'm not going to come in here with Docker pants on, Doc Marten shoes, or like cardigan sweater. Elbow. Yeah. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to have a hoodie on. I might even have some Timbs on. I'm going to have some J's on, some Maxes on, because that's not reality. That's TV, and it's a shame that TV portrays us like that. And so the same thing with you. So now on the same line of thinking, though, have you dealt with racism since you've been in this field?
Oh, man. Directly related to being in the field, I have, but my experiences, I feel as though have been very just kind of like typical of like the environment, like experiences. So yeah, I'm trying to think of an instance where like I experienced like racism because I was like in the department or like in the department. That particular, I can honestly say that I've kind of avoided somehow. Like I haven't experienced any sort of racism from like faculty members, or anything like that. And I definitely feel as though like I'm very lucky because of that.
Okay, good.
But I have experienced instances from other students that have been very frustrating. And one of them in particular, I remember I was in the elevator getting ready to go to my office. And I got in the elevator, and as the doors were getting ready to close, like 3 undergrads walked in. And I was like, I had my backpack and everything. So I'm like, in my head, even now, I'm like, I don't understand how you could not understand that I was a student. Like, I've never seen like any of the like custodial workers wearing like a backpack and like a jacket and everything, like walking around. Like they have
Right, right.
But we're getting off the elevator and one of them stops me and they're like, excuse me, we lost our key to the office. Can you like open the office so we can get in? And I was like,
Wow.
I don't think my key works for your door. And they were like, don't you have like the master key? And I was like, and that's when it hit me. I was like, you think I'm a custodian?
Yep.
I was like, I don't work here. I'm actually a graduate student and my office is right next door to yours. And it wasn't even like a moment of like, oh my God, I'm sorry. It was just, oh, and then walked away.
Wow.
And I was like, really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
And I honestly feel like part of the way that I avoid that is I always have headphones on. Whether I'm listening to music or not, because I know stuff like that happens, like I will intentionally just like walk around like this with my headphones on.
Really?
Sometimes there's no music playing or anything. I'm just like bobbing my head to nothing.
Wow.
I'm just like, I know if I have these headphones on, people will not approach me unless they know me and actually want something. So I avoid all of that.
I was gonna say, so that's a form of avoidance.
Yeah, it's like okay, nobody's going to approach somebody with headphones on. It's just rude. You don't do that.
Yeah. So let me ask you. So if you're on that line of thinking, because those are microaggressions that people don't understand that they're actually, well, I think they do. They know what they're doing. But either way, so if you're avoiding, you don't even want to encounter those type of people. That's what you're saying?
Most of the time, that is true.
Gotcha.
Like there are some times where I don't mind having like a teaching moment for people.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just I feel like I have to be in like the right mindset,
Okay.
like the right state of mind to like be prepared for that teaching moment.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, like I feel as though my teaching moment might come off as me yelling at some random person.
Yeah.
So it's like I have to like be mindful of that being a possibility while I'm like walking around campus or something in order for it to actually turn out that way.
So you sure you need to keep putting your mental health on pause?
Yeah, I know. It's something like
I mean, it's obvious to me that you need to be talking to somebody during those times. No, but but seriously, yeah, but seriously though, John, man, I enjoyed talking to you because I think you've enlightened me on the world of astrophysics, and not that I want to be one, but I'm more interested in a lot of the young people getting involved in science. And what I always like to do on the show is always like to give people an opportunity to give advice. Like when it comes to the sciences and just in your personal life as well, what kind of advice would you leave more specific for our young people? Because I think they need to hear that.
Yeah, so one piece of advice that I can give, just kind of like going off like the most recent like kind of set of questions, is I know that, so you just asked me like had I faced any like racism or anything like that in the departments that I've been in.
Yeah.
My experience may have been very minimal. I can give you I can give you multiple examples of other people who have had the exact opposite experience.
Gotcha.
It is very situational. The field is still, there are still very few like minorities in like departments. So depending on like where you are and who you're working with is going to determine like how much of that you have to deal with.
Gotcha.
But I'm not saying that to discourage like the next generation of people.
Right.
The reason that I'm saying that is because I want you to be fully aware.
Yeah.
And I want you to understand that your experience is going to be your own to make. And if you go into these departments and into this field aware that that's a possibility, you'll automatically like have your eyes open and be on alert to certain things happening. So you'll be able to hopefully pick up on those things and maneuver around that and maneuver through the field a lot easier.
Yeah. I will be honest with you. I totally subscribe to that. I'm hyper vigilant when it comes to microaggressions. And I do that, and I'm like that for a reason, is because I'm always, just what you're saying, I'm always looking to educate is in every situation. And I've mastered, I would say I've mastered dealing with individuals with microaggressions. I look forward just so I can teach, and hopefully we can move forward. Because none of us live in a vacuum. We all see color. We all know some of the history because they're not teaching all of the history. But at the same time, I think that we owe it to ourselves. That's white, black, Caucasian, Hispanic, Asian. Everyone owe it to themselves to do their due diligence when it comes to history, to learn more about the other race, and ultimately to come together. And so that's really what my podcast is about. It's just really reaching out to all cultures. And a lot of people say, well, we don't want to listen to it because I had people say, well, why is it always got to be about black? This is an educational podcast, and I'm trying to educate black people. I'm trying to educate white people, Asian, everyone on the fact that what we're living with is inappropriate, uncalled for, and then some of the time we do it to ourselves. But how do we get better? How do we work together? How do we come together? How do we bridge the gap and just say we're people, we're just humans? We don't do that because we're so stuck in our cubicles and our little sections, worried about our own selves. So I definitely, what you're saying is spot on. And everybody's not going to experience racism. Everybody's not going to experience microaggressions either. But when you do, you have to handle those things with care because they're delicate, and you can't always be the one that's the aggressor when it comes to that. So no, I appreciate that. So now, last question. So if you had to do it all over again, would you do it?
So where are we starting? I already know
you can't omit things, John. Come on now.
I already know my answer, but like, just in case, like, are we giving like a specific starting point or
wherever you want to start, John?
So that's just me. That's just me like joking around. But
yeah,
in all honesty, if I could do it all over again, I wouldn't.
Wow.
I would choose not to.
Wow.
And this is actually really funny because my wife and I just had this conversation the other day because we were watching like an episode of Bones where they were talking about time travel.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, if you can go back in time to any moment and change it, what would you choose? And I was like, I would choose nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that I say I would choose nothing is because everything that has happened to me in the past, be it good, be it bad, and everything in between, has propelled me to where I am now.
Yeah.
And I don't want a chance messing that up because I feel like I may not be exactly like where I saw myself being at like 34, 33, however old I am now. But I feel as though I am where I am supposed to be in life. Yeah. I am doing what I'm meant to be doing in life. Wow. And if I go back and change anything, there's no telling how that will throw me off the trajectory that I ended up on.
Yep.
And the example that I gave my wife was, I can go back and I can say, I can be like super like annoyed and be like, yeah, I wish that I can go back in time and change the way that my father approached me when I first decided to go to school for astrophysics. Then I would have had support at home. Mm-hmm. If I would have had that support at home, would I have clung to Dr. Cruz in the way that I did?
Yeah. If
I didn't do that, where would I have ended up?
Yeah.
Like, would I have ended up with the same opportunities because I was under him? Mm-hmm. Maybe not. Like we don't know. I was like, but I know what happened now. And yes, there are definitely like regrets. There are things that I wish I had done different, but because of where I am now, I don't think that I would choose to do anything different because those regrets make me think more about my current actions.
Gotcha.
They make me think, okay, how, if I do this, how will that affect me and the people around me? And I'm more aware of all of those decisions that I make now because of the way that things happened in the past. So yeah, I don't think I would change anything.
Wow, that's deep there. I agree. I think once we start to think about and meddle with changing how we get to where we are, we will never be here. You know, we wouldn't be in this position if we
Yep.
changed anything. If you go trying to omit anything or doing something different, we don't know how it would turn out. So, you know, I think that I agree with you. I think we're all where we need to be and supposed to be at this moment. And so we just got to figure out how to move from that place to the next place. And
Yep.
so, you know, we got to focus. And so I thank you, John, for coming in, man, and really like opening my eyes. And I hope, you know, when people hear this, that they understand that, you know, astrophysics is a thing, for one, and then two, it doesn't have a particular color, shape, size, or anything when it comes to it. And so you've been educated us, and I appreciate that, and I thank you for showing up, doing your thing, man. um,
It's no
this
problem
is
at all.
this
Thanks for
is a
inviting me.
this is a the beginning of a great friendship, because I'm gonna need you in the next year.
Oh yeah, like I said, like anytime like dissertation stuff or
Yeah.
whatever, just give me a call.
Well, man, I'm gonna be on it because I'm gonna need it. But you know, at the end of the show, I always tell people that, you know, we have the ability to change our situation only if we can focus on what we can change. And
Yeah,
that's a true statement, man. And I truly believe that if we stop focusing on other things and focus on what is in our control, I think we'll be some awesome people, awesome human beings. So,
I fully agree.
well, I appreciate you coming through, man. And we're gonna get out of here. But everybody, don't forget, subscribe, hit your subscribe button everywhere you see Mentality Unchained on your I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on TikTok, I'm on Spotify, I'm on Spotify video, YouTube, I'm everywhere. So anywhere you can find Mentality Unchained, please subscribe. I thank you guys for your support. We're out.